On the night of the grand wedding, my husband, the crown prince, stormed out to save the love of his life. Everyone says I am virtuous and generous, but I turned around and locked the palace gates tight, pouring him a full cup of Yellow Springs wine. He thought he was rushing towards love. Little did he know, that was a death trap I had meticulously laid for him. Living this life again, I will no longer play the role of His Virtuous Your Highness. Your Highness, it is bad. Miss Fuyi is by Xuanwu Lake, saying if you don't go, she'll jump in. A little eunuch scrambled and tumbled into the jubilant Eastern Palace, his voice so shrill it was like fingernails scratching against an iron pot. The crown prince before me, Xiao Chengji, hadn't even had time to take off his intricately embroidered wedding robes when the blood instantly drained from his handsome face. He stood up with a whoosh, the force so great that it sent the peanuts and longans on the table rolling all over the floor. "What did you say?" He stared dead at me, the anxiety in his eyes and a trace of imperceptible pleading, looking like he was acting in some prime-time soap opera. The surrounding maids and eunuchs didn't dare breathe too loud and all lowered their heads. But out of the corners of their eyes, their gazes swept back and forth over me like searchlights, waiting to see how I, the new crown princess, would go crazy. After all, on the wedding night, my husband going off to save another woman was practically carving the word humiliation right onto my forehead. In my past life, I really did go crazy. I pulled out my hairpin and held it across my neck, screaming shrilly, using the most drastic method to stop him from taking even half a step out of the palace gates. And the result? I saved the face of the East Palace, but it made him hate me for 10 years. His beloved Liu Fuyi accidentally fell into the water and died, and every bit of this debt was tallied against me. For 10 years, he and I played the part of a loving couple, while behind the scenes he was already sharpening his knife. On the day I went into labor, he had my entire Wen family executed on charges of treason and colluding with the enemy. I was tied to the cold delivery bed, watching with my own eyes as he took our newborn child, that little life still crying for milk in swaddling clothes, and forcefully cut him out, drowning him in a bucket of excrement. He pinched my chin, smiling gently yet cruelly. "When you etchu, does it hurt, watching your own flesh and blood die before your eyes while being powerless to do anything? This is the pain I felt when I lost Aning. Now, you and your bastard spawn can go be buried with her together." Monstrous hatred allowed me to break free from my restraints, and I bit through his windpipe in one go. A blood debt paid in blood. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to this crossroads of fate. I curled my lips without batting an eye, looking at Xiao Chengji in front of me, who was so anxious he was about to start beatboxing on the spot. My heart remained completely unmoved, and I even felt a bit like laughing. Having a love brain is really something. Whoever has it dies. Your Highness? Why are you looking at me like that? I slowly stood up, walked over to him, and proactively straightened his slightly messy collar. My fingertips brushed past the Qilin embroidery on his chest. That spot was the fatal wound I had bitten in my past life. Me movements were gentle, and my tone was so tender it could practically drip water. "A life is at stake. Your Highness, go quickly." Xiao Chengji froze, seemingly not expecting this reaction from me. The pleading in his eyes turned into astonishment, then immediately transformed into deep approval and a trace of guilt. "Yuechu, you really don't blame me." I smiled, smiling like a white lotus flower swaying in the wind. "How could I? Since I married your Highness, naturally I must share your Highness's burdens." I lowered my eyes, my long lashes concealing all the mockery and calculation, and my voice took on a perfectly timed choke. Sister Fuyi was just confused for a moment. "Your Highness, go and come back quickly. Don't let her do anything foolish. I will stay right here, waiting for your Highness to return." This speech of considering the big picture straight up fried his CPU. He was a mess of emotion. He grasped my hand and said solemnly, "Yuechu, you've suffered. Rest assured I, Xiao Chengji, will definitely not fail you in your position as crown princess in this life. Good Lord, he has already started with the empty promises. I rolled a massive eye internally, but my face maintained that virtuous mask of, I totally buy your nonsense. I believe in you, your highness. Xiao Chengji was completely conquered by my appearance of profound righteousness. He gave me a deep look, as if to carve my goodness into his heart, and then rushed out the palace doors without looking back. He walked away with such resolve, such hesitation, free determination, as if arriving 1 second late meant his love would be washed away by the lake water. The palace doors slammed shut behind him with a bang. The smile on my face vanished instantly. Summonon come. Crown princess, my personal maid. Juntao looked at me cautiously, the rims of her eyes red. Lock the door dead from the inside for me. Put 3 big locks on it. I unhurriedly sat back at the table, picked up a red date, and chewed it slowly. Then call everyone in the Eastern Palace to the front courtyard. I have something to say. Although Juntao was confused, she immediately did as she was told. I picked up that cup of nuptial wine he didn't have time to drink, raised it towards the empty seat opposite me, and gently clinked the air. Xiao Chengji, I wish you and your Liu Fuyi eternal unity of hearts tonight, and a shared journey to the Yellow Springs. I downed the wine in 1 gulp. The spicy liquid slid down my throat, feeling like the blood from my past life. Right at that moment, outside the Eastern Palace, the sounds of killing suddenly rose on all sides, and firelight shot into the sky, dyeing half the night sky red. Juntao ran in, panic-stricken. Crown Princess, it is bad. The Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard has surrounded the Eastern Palace. I put down my wine cup, the corners of my mouth curling into a cold smile. The fish has taken the bait. What are you panicking for? I wiped the corner of my mouth unhurriedly, as if the earth-shaking shouts of killing outside were just the accompaniment of fireworks during a festival. The sky isn't falling. Juntao was so anxious she was about to cry. Crown Princess, it is really the Imperial Guard. The one leading them seems to be His Highness the 7th Prince, they said that His Highness the Crown Prince left his post without permission, met privately with unknown persons outside the palace, acting suspiciously, and is suspected of plotting treason. Oh, I raised my eyebrows. This charge was even more serious than I had imagined. It seems Xiao Chengji's good brothers are planning to finish him off for good tonight. In my past life, I risked my death to stop Xiao Chengji, making him miss this Hongmen banquet. Although it preserved his position as crown prince, it also made him miss the chance to be caught by his political enemies. In this life, I sent him out with my own hands, sent him right under the butcher's knife of his 7th brother, who has always been at odds with him, Xiao Beishuan. Xuanwu Lake. That place doesn't just have his delicate white moonlight, but also spies sent by the Beatty Kingdom. Tonight is the very day they agreed to exchange intelligence. Xiao Chengji's political enemies have long since set up an inescapable dragnet, just waiting for him, the protagonist, to make his entrance, and Liu Fuyi's perfectly timed, lake-jumping show was just the final safeguard to lure him into the trap. It is a pity that love-struck fool Xiao Chengji, his heart and eyes are filled with his white moonlight. How could he ever imagine that he has already become a dead piece on someone else's chessboard? Crown Princess, you have to think of a way quick. Juntao was still spinning around anxiously beside me. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at myself in the wedding dress. This face, still carrying the innocence of a young girl, already bore the weight of a lifetime of blood feud. I raised my hand and gently stroked the inner side of my wrist. It was smooth as jade there, without the ugly scars worn out by iron chains in my past life. This is a new beginning, a hunting time that belongs only to me, Wen Yuechu. Away, I faced the mirror, slowly revealing an eerie smile. The best way is to do nothing at all. Saying that, I took a deep breath, then rolled my eyes back, and fell straight backward. Crown Princess! Chuntao let out an earth-shattering scream. Before I fainted, I heard the loud crash of the palace gates being rammed open by a heavy object. Excellent! The timing is just right. When I woke up again, it was already the next morning. I lay on the soft bed, surrounded by people. The imperial physician was checking my pulse, while the emperor and empress sat not far away, their faces so gloomy that water could practically drip from them. Your Majesty, Your Highness, the Crown Princess. This is a case of sudden agitation attacking the heart and excessive worry, causing her qi and blood to flow in reverse, leading to a temporary faint. The imperial physician replied, trembling with fear. Upon hearing this, the empress's tears fell immediately. She walked quickly to the bedside, took my hand, her voice full of heartache. My poor daughter-in-law to suffer such a grievance on her wedding night. Your Majesty, you must seek justice for Yuechu. I opened my eyes at just the right moment, looking blank, then immediately struggled to rise and pay my respects. Your son greets Imperial Father and Imperial Mother. Quick, lie down. The Empress hurriedly held me down. You child, why are you still fussing over these empty formalities when you are in this state? I coughed weakly twice, the rims of my eyes reddening, tears flowing before I could speak. Imperial Father, Imperial Mother, His Highness the Crown Prince. How is he? It is all my fault. I shouldn't have persuaded His Highness to go. It is all my fault, saintly act, instantly ignited the Empress's fury. No, it is not your fault. The Empress patted the back of my hand and said through gritted teeth, it is that vixen, it is that shameless Liu Fuyi, and that good son of ours whose heart has been blinded by lard. Minister Wen, you raised a good daughter, educated and reasonable, who considers the big picture, whereas I raised a vile spawn. Standing to the side, silent all this time, was my father, the current Prime Minister Wen Boan. He also wore a look of deep grief at this moment, cupping his hands toward the Emperor and saying, Your Majesty, please quell your anger. His Highness, the Crown Prince, was merely momentarily confused. Please, for the sake of his youth and ignorance, deal with him leniently. My dad's move here. This is what you call a stratospheric play. On the surface, he is pleading for mercy, but actually, he is reminding the Emperor. Your son is not only stupid, but he is also young and unreliable. Look at my daughter again. So sensible, so understanding of the big picture. Comparing the two, the difference is immediately obvious. The Emperor's face grew even darker. He abruptly slammed the table, confused. He secretly met with Northern D spies and was caught red-handed by the Imperial Guards, with both witnesses and material evidence present. Is this something the word confused can explain? I think he wants to sit on my throne ahead of time. My heart went. Good Lord, it is even more thrilling than I thought. This isn't just leaving his post without permission anymore. It is fast, forwarded straight to treason. 7th Prince Xiaobei, you really are my god, tear assist. Father Emperor, please quell your anger. I struggled to kneel by the bedside, my forehead touching the ground, my voice trembling. His Highness, the Crown Prince, absolutely has no intention of rebellion. He was just too worried about Miss Fuyi. Please investigate clearly, Father Emperor. The more I pleaded for mercy, the more the Emperor's rage intensified. He looked at my appearance of suffering a massive grievance, yet still speaking up for my husband, and the pity in his eyes and the disappointment in Xiao Chengji were almost overflowing. Enough, the Emperor shouted angrily. Bring him before me! Soon, a wretched-looking, shackled Xiao Chengji was dragged up. He saw me. His eyes instantly turned red, and he roared. Wen Yuechu, was it you? Did you set me up? Meme, no bro, with that IQ of yours. How did you become the Crown Prince? I hadn't even opened my mouth before the Empress exploded. You bastard. You still have the nerve to speak. For your sake, Yuechu spent the wedding night alone in an empty room, terrified to the point of fainting. You show no gratitude, yet you dare to slander her. Someone slap his mouth for me." Several burly matrons immediately stepped forward and started slapping him left and right. Smack, smack, smack! The crisp sound of slaps echoed in the hall, and hearing it made me feel so damn satisfied. Xiao Chengji was slapped senseless. He couldn't believe that his empress mother, who had always doted on him the most, would actually lay such a heavy hand on him for an outsider like me. "Mother, you are crazy. This woman has a heart of snakes and scorpions. It was her." "Shut up." The empress trembled with rage, pointing at his nose and cursing. "Open your dog eyes and look clearly. Yuechu is still pleading for you even now. You are being played like a monkey. You've been set up, and yet you are still here blaming others. How could I give birth to such an idiot like you?" Xiao Chengji was beaten until blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. He glared at me viciously, his eyes looking like he wanted to swallow me whole and skin me alive. I met his gaze. My eyes pure and innocent, like a little white flower ravaged by a storm, still carrying a hint of just the right amount of fear and grievance. With acting like that, it'd be a shame not to win an Oscar. "Your Highness, why would you say that?" My eyes were swimming with tears. "I really just wanted you to go save someone." "You?" Xiao Chengji was so angry he couldn't catch his breath, nearly passing out on the spot. He knows what I said is the truth, and he can't find any evidence to accuse me. It was me who persuaded him to go, but he chose the path himself, and he jumped into the pit himself. This feeling of being a mute eating bitter herbs, unable to voice the bitterness, must be pretty hard to bear, right? This is only just the beginning, Xiao Chengji. The emperor watched all this coldly, finally waving his hand to put a stop to this farce. "That is enough." He wearily rubbed his brow. "Xiao Chengji, for colluding with foreign enemies and plotting treason, is deposed from the position of crown prince, thrown into the heavenly prison, and will await sentencing. The Liu enchantress, for bewitching the heir apparent, is to be imprisoned immediately and interrogated strictly. As for the crown princess..." The emperor's gaze turned to me, softening considerably. "You are a good child. From today on, you will move back to the Prime Minister's estate for a temporary stay. Once this matter is investigated clearly, I will give you an explanation." I sneered inwardly. Is this considered returning the goods? But this is just as well. Leaving the Eastern Palace, the center of this whirlpool, I can better proceed with the next step of my plan. "Your daughter, in-law. Thanks, Imperial Father." I prostrated on the ground, shoulders trembling slightly, crying like a pear blossom bathed in rain. In the carriage leaving the palace, my dad, the old fox of the court, oh no, the current Prime Minister Wen Boan, finally put away that expression of deep grief. He stroked his beard while narrowing his eyes at me. "Yuechu, tell Dad the truth. Did you arrange what happened last night?" I lifted the carriage curtain, watching the street scenery flying backward outside the window, and gave a faint smile. "Dad, daughter only persuaded His Highness, the Crown Prince, to go save someone. Who could have known what would happen next?" My dad gave me a deep look, and didn't ask further, just sighed. "You, however, well done." Upon returning to the Prime Minister's estate, the first thing I did was to bathe and change clothes. I had Chuntao prepare a full bucket of pomelo leaf water, and I scrubbed myself carefully from head to toe, as if to wash away all the filth and blood of my past life. When I changed into a fresh, plain-colored dress and walked out of the room, I felt like I had been completely reborn. "Miss, your letter." Chuntao handed over an unsigned envelope. I opened the letter. Inside was just a slip of paper with 8 characters written in a flamboyant scrawl. "Many thanks, sister-in-law. Pleasure working with you." I couldn't be more familiar with the owner of this handwriting, the 7th Prince, Xiao Beishuan. He held the note to the candle flame and watched it turn to ash. "A pleasure doing business, Xiao Beishuan. Do you think that by bringing down a crown prince, you can sit back and reap the benefits? What I want is not just Xiao Chengji's life. It is this entire realm. Over the next few days, the capital was on edge. The crown prince was deposed. The Liu family was raided, and every official in the court who was close to Xiao Chengji feared for their safety. And I, as the victim, stayed dutifully in the prime minister's manor, copying scriptures and chanting to Buddha every day, praying for the royal family, praying for my ex-husband, playing the role of a virtuous, sensible former crown princess to perfection. That day, I was sunbathing in the courtyard, thinking about how to make a move on the Salt and Iron Bureau's business next, when an uninvited guest showed up. It was Lu Fuyi. She had actually gotten out of the Dali Temple's prison. She was wearing rough prison clothes, her hair was a mess, and there were a few whip marks on her face. She looked haggard, but those eyes were still filled with venom. Wen Yuechu, as soon as she saw me, she rushed over like a madwoman. "You bitch, give me back my brother Chengji." The guards beside me immediately stepped forward to stop her. I leisurely put down the teacup in my hand and raised my eyelids to look at her. "Miss Liu, watch your tongue. Now, there is no brother Chengji of yours. Only the prisoner Xiao Chengji. It was you. It was all your design," she roared, looking like a madwoman. "You knew all along that Xuanwu Lake was a trap. You made brother Chengji go there on purpose." I smiled. "Miss Liu, you can eat carelessly, but you cannot speak carelessly. I am just a woman of the inner chambers. How could I know about the dangerous schemes in the court? You, on the other hand, have been in close contact with beady spies, yet you are still able to stand here safe and sound. It really is surprising." I deliberately emphasized the words safe and sound. Sure enough, Liu Fuyi's face instantly turned deathly pale. To be able to get out of the prison, she must have paid a price. For example, selling out certain people, or agreeing to certain deals. You are talking nonsense." Her eyes were evasive, and her momentum weakened. "Meme, talking nonsense." I stood up and walked step by step up to her, lowering my voice to a volume only the two of us could hear. "You think that by faking jumping into the lake to lure Xiao Chengji out of the palace, and then having your father's subordinates disguise themselves as Northern D spies to stage a secret rendezvous, you could successfully frame the seventh prince and help Xiao Chengji eliminate his dissidents?" "How could you know?" Liu Fuyi screamed, her face written with disbelief. I looked at her terrified expression, smiling even more brilliantly. "Not only do I know your plan, I also know that your plan was turned against you by the seventh prince. Those captured Northern D spies were real. That treaty that was discovered was also real." The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. "Miss Liu, you played this game of chess terribly." Liu Fuyi trembled all over, as if all her strength had been drained away and slumped to the ground. "Number, impossible. Nothing is impossible." I looked down at her from above, my gaze cold. "You think you are Xiao Chengji's white moonlight. But actually, you are just a pawn in his hand that can be discarded at any time. And he is just a discarded pawn on someone else's board." So pitiful. I turned around, not looking at her anymore, leaving her with just a view of my back. "Chuntao, see the guest out. Miss Liu isn't feeling well, and our prime minister's estate is too small a temple to accommodate such a giant Buddha. I have no interest in knowing how Liu Fuyi was dragged away. What I do know is she is finished." Those words of mine would be like a poisoned thorn, stabbing deep into her heart. She would suspect, seek proof, and make a scene. A pawn that has lost its value, yet knows too many secrets, usually has only one end. Sure enough, 3 days later, news came from the Dali Temple that the key prisoner Liu Fuyi had committed suicide to escape punishment. In prison, a length of white silk ended her remaining life. When I heard the news, I was pruning a pot of clivia. The scissors went snip, cutting off a withered yellow leaf. "Good riddance," I said indifferently. Chuntao stood to the side, a hint of awe and fear in her eyes as she looked at me. I ignored her. "Xiao Chengji has fallen. Liu Fuyi is dead. but this is far from enough. What I want is to pull them up by the roots. Miss outside. His Highness the Seventh Prince is here. I put down the scissors and patted the dirt off my hands. What is bound to come will come. Xiao Beishuan, my brother. In-law from my past life. My partner in this life. This is a man 100 times harder to deal with than Xiao Chengji. He is calculating, his methods are ruthless, and he is extremely shrewd. In the previous life, he bided his time, eventually emerging from the rebellion of the princes to become the final winner. It is a pity, he won the world, but didn't have time to enjoy it, before being dragged by this lunatic. Me, along with Xiao Chengji, and blown up in mutual destruction. Speaking of which, I really do feel a bit sorry for him. When I saw Xiao Beishuan in the main hall, he was holding a cup of tea, savoring it slowly. He was wearing a dark brocade robe, standing tall and straight, his face cold and stern, with a natural air of aloofness between his brows. Hearing footsteps, he raised his head, his deep gaze falling upon me. "Sister, in-law, have you been well lately?" He spoke, his voice cold, devoid of any emotion. I curtsied. "Thank you for the Seventh Prince's concern. Everything is well. Sit." He pointed to the chair opposite him. I sat down as told, cutting straight to the chase. "What brings your Highness here today?" He put down the teacup, his index finger tapping lightly on the tabletop, making a tap-tap sound, as if tapping on one's heart. "I came to ask sister, in-law, one thing." He stared at me, bringing down the crown prince. "Was it really a happy cooperation between you and me?" My heart tightened. He was testing me. I raised my head to meet his gaze, revealing a perfectly timed look of confusion and innocence. "Why does your Highness say this? The crown prince being deposed was his own doing. What does it have to do with me? As for that note, perhaps your Highness sent it to the wrong person. Act, just brazen it out. As long as I don't admit it, he has no evidence." Xiao Beishuan looked at me, looked for a long time, so long that I almost thought my disguise had been seen through. Suddenly, he smiled. On that face which was always frozen like ice, a very faint yet extremely good-looking smile blossomed, like snow just beginning to melt. "Interesting," he said. "When you eschew, you are much more interesting than I imagined." He stood up and walked over to me, his tall figure casting a shadow that enveloped me. "Since sister-in-law says it has nothing to do with you, then it has nothing to do with you." He bent down, leaned close to my ear, and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, "However, I still have to remind sister-in-law of one thing. This game of chess has only just begun. The player had better not let themselves turn into a piece on the board too." His warm breath sprayed against my ear, sending a shiver through me. I steadied my nerves and lowered my voice right back to retort, "Thanks for the reminder, Your Highness. But as to who is the player and who is the piece, it is too early to say for sure. My catchphrase is, think big." Xiao Beishuan straightened up and took a deep look at me. In that gaze, there was scrutiny, appreciation, and a hint of amusement I couldn't quite read. "I'll be waiting." He left those words behind, then turned and walked away. It wasn't until his back disappeared through the doorway that I slowly unclenched my tight fist. My palm was covered in cold sweat. Scheming with a tiger really is a thrill. Having sent off the big Buddha that is Xiao Beishuan, I immediately started my master plan to make money. Revenge requires power, but even more than that, it requires money. I took stock of the Tao then. I found my dad. "Dad, I want a distribution map of all the grain shops in Jiangnan, as well as the routes and schedules for the quartz canal shipments for the next 3 months. My dad was drinking tea and nearly spat it out when he heard that. "What do you need those for? Girl, don't mess around. The grain business in Jiangnan runs deep. Behind it are all the major noble clans and imperial relatives. Even though our Wen family holds the prime ministership, it is difficult for us to interfere. Dad, don't worry about that. Just give me the stuff." I was firm. If there is a loss, it is on me. If there is a profit, we split it too. 8, you get 2. I get 8. My dad puffed out his beard and glared. Hey, you little brat, trying to talk business with your dad now? In the end, he couldn't say no to me and gave me the materials. Once I had the documents, I locked myself in the study for 3 whole days and nights, relying on memories from my past life. I knew that in 2 months, a once-in-a-century flood would hit Jiangnan. When that happens, grain prices in Jiangnan will skyrocket more than 100-fold. And what I needed to do was stockpile as much grain as possible before this natural disaster struck. But that wasn't enough. Just hoarding grain was too risky and too easily detected. I needed a perfect plan, one that would let me make a killing silently, while also digging a massive pit for my enemies. My gaze finally settled on the canal transport routes. An inconspicuous tributary caught my attention. This tributary leads to a place called Luoxia Town. In my past life, I once heard Xiao Chengji mention in passing that it seemed to be the location of a private treasury belonging to a prince who was his enemy. A bold plan took shape in my mind. I used most of my funds to buy grain at low prices all over Jiangnan, but I didn't ship it away. Instead, I stored it right there in rented warehouses. At the same time, I let out word that I had my eye on the Jiangnan silk business and was buying up massive amounts of raw silk, preparing to ship it north. To make the act more real, I actually sent people to buy a batch of low-quality raw silk and loaded it onto ships with great fanfare, heading north along the main canal route. Everyone's eyes were drawn to my silk fleet. No one knew that at the same time, another fleet flying ordinary merchant flags carrying the truly high-quality grain I'd bought, with the remaining small portion of my funds, had quietly sailed into that tributary leading to Luoxia Town. After doing all this, the only thing left for me to do was wait. Wait for the floods. Wait for grain prices to skyrocket. Wait for my enemies to walk step by step into the trap I had set for them. During this period, Xiao Beishuan came by 2 more times. He wouldn't say a word, just brought a pot of good wine and a small dish of appetizers, sitting across from me pouring and drinking by himself. Those eyes of his were like they were equipped with X-rays, staring at me until I got the creeps. 7th Highness, if you are bored out of your mind, you can go help my ex-husband overturn his case. Don't keep running over here. I am an abandoned consort, and I can't bear the consequences, I said snappily. He leisurely took a sip of wine and said, the food in the imperial prison isn't good. Xiao Chengji has lost weight. Oh, well, that works out. He is losing weight. He curses you every day. That is good. It shows he still has strength. He won't die. He also said, once he gets out, he is definitely going to cut you into 1,000 pieces. I finally put down the ledger in my hand and looked up at him. Xiao Beishuan, what exactly are you here for? To do stand-up comedy? He looked at me, suddenly smiling. I just came to see if my future partner is up to no good again. This guy, he is definitely a rebirth. Or, he has a system on him. A month later, news came from Jiangnan. The torrential rains were incessant, and the river waters had surged. Another half-month passed. The Jiangnan levee burst, and a once-in-a-century flood broke out. In no time, the lands of Jiangnan, thousands of miles of fertile fields, were turned into a watery kingdom. Countless people were displaced, and starving corpses littered the countryside. Grain prices, a different price every day, rising like crazy. From the initial few dozen coppers a stone, it skyrocketed all the way to a few dozen taels of silver a stone. And even then, there was a price but no supply. The court urgently opened the granaries to release grain. But the grain transport was cut off by the floods. Distant water cannot quench immediate thirst. Just when everyone thought Jiangnan was done for, a shocking piece of news arrived. A mysterious, benevolent Wen opened granaries all across Jiangnan at the same time, selling grain to the disaster victims at prices far below the market rate, although there was a purchase limit per person. This move was undoubtedly a lifesaver, greatly alleviating the grain shortage in Jiangnan. The name Benevolent Wen resounded throughout Jiangnan overnight. The emperor was overjoyed and ordered a thorough investigation into this person, intending to grant a heavy reward. And right now, I am sitting in the back garden of the Prime Minister's manor, leisurely sipping tea and listening to the report my dad had sent back from Jiangnan. Miss, we've already sold 70% of the grain we stockpiled. As per your instructions, the remaining 30% was all donated to the government for free. Well done, I nodded. We probably made this much. The steward held up 5 fingers. Even his voice was trembling. 500,000 taels of silver. With a principal of 50,000 taels, it increased tenfold in 2 months. This overwhelming wealth hit my dad so hard he was dizzy. Crazy, truly crazy. He looked at the ledger, muttering incessantly. I smiled. This isn't over yet. Dad, do you remember Luoxia town that I asked you to look into? My dad came back to his senses. I remember, we found it. That is one of the 4th Prince Xiaochengzi's private vaults, hiding a large amount of weapons and armor. The 4th Prince Xiaochengzi, Prince Xian, the emperor's other fine son, and also one of Xiaochengzi's mortal enemies. That is good. I lifted my teacup and blew on the steam. Now we can accidentally leak the news about our lost grain ship to the Dali Temple. My dad froze. Then suddenly it dawned on him. The way he looked at me, it was like looking at a monster. You are killing 3 birds with 1 stone. That is right. I used the silk business as a cover, attracting everyone's attention. Using the mysterious identity of Wen the Benevolent, he reaped high fame and wealth in Jiangnan. Finally, used that grain ship that went the wrong way to drag the 4th prince, who is hiding weapons, into the water. The private treasury in Luoxia town was raided, and Xiaochengzi couldn't explain his way out of it. The emperor was already paranoid due to the crown prince's treason, and now with the addition of a major case of a prince privately manufacturing weapons and armor, he was furious. The 4th prince, Xiaochengzi, followed in Xiaochengzi's footsteps, being stripped of his title and confined in the imperial clan court. In the royal court, the 2 top contenders for the succession, one deposed, one imprisoned. The biggest beneficiary goes without saying. It was the 7th prince, Xiao Beishuan. That night, Xiao Beishuan came uninvited once again. He didn't bring wine, but was carrying a food box instead. Braised pork hock fresh out of the pot. He placed the food box on the table and opened it, the aroma filling the air. I looked at him, saying nothing. He picked up a piece for me and put it in my bowl. Congratulations, great philanthropist Wen. Same to you, 7th prince. I picked up my chopsticks and started eating unceremoniously. Don't you have anything to say to me? He asked. Yeah, I swallowed the meat in my mouth and mumbled. Next time remember to bring some vinegar. Eating nothing but meat is a bit greasy. Xiao Beishuan. He suddenly felt that those previous evaluations of him being scheming and ruthless seemed a bit ridiculous in front of this woman. She doesn't play by the rules at all, Wen Yuechu. He suddenly turned serious. Father Emperor has decided to appoint a new crown prince. I gnawed on the pork knuckle and nodded. Oh, don't you want to know who it is? Who else could it be but you? I rolled my eyes at him. Xiaochengzi is done for. Xiaochengzi is imprisoned, and the rest are either rejects or unweaned babies. If it isn't you, could it be my dad? Xiao Beishuan was choked into silence by me for a good while. He took a deep breath, seeming to try and calm himself down. Me being made crown prince is good for both of us. Of course, I wiped my mouth. When you become crown prince, I'll be the ex-crown princess. When you become emperor, I'll be the ex-crown princess. Saying that out loud is so prestigious. A vein seemed to be throbbing on Xiao Beishuan's temple. He found that discussing serious matters with this woman was simply torture. Xiao Beishuan was eventually made crown prince after all. On the day of the investiture ceremony, I stayed at the Prime Minister's manor and went nowhere. As the head of all officials, My dad was running off his feet. When he returned, it was already deep into the night, his face wearing unconcealable fatigue and excitement. Yuechu, Dad has something to tell you. He mysteriously pulled me into the study. Go ahead. The new crown prince. He has petitioned His Majesty for a decree. Petitioned? Petitioned for what? I had a bad feeling in my gut. He petitioned to marry you as his crown princess. Me? The teacup in my hand fell to the floor with a fei-clang fei and shattered into pieces. Is he crazy? I cried out involuntarily. I was married to his brother. I am his sister, in-law. He wants to marry me. What do you call this? Keeping the good stuff in the family. My dad was also startled by my reaction. You, keep your voice down. If outsiders were to hear this, I don't care. I spun around in circles, fuming. Did a donkey kick Xiao Beishuan in the head? Are all the women in the world dead? Why does he have to marry me, a woman who has been married before? This is absolutely the biggest joke in the world. It is even more ridiculous that the emperor actually agreed. His Majesty feels he owes you a debt, and he appreciates your deep understanding of righteousness from before. So, my dad's voice grew fainter and fainter. So, I am being treated as a prize, to be awarded to his son? I laughed out of anger. No way, I don't agree. This marriage, I won't agree to it, even if I die. Are you kidding me? I racked my brains to bring down that scumbag Xiao Changji for freedom, for revenge, to keep 800 young hunks in the future, not to jump from one fire pit into another. That guy, Xiao Beishuan, you can tell at a glance he is not someone to mess with. If I live with him, will I have any good days? Me dad looked at my intense reaction, his face full of difficulty. But this is already a matter settled by His Majesty's golden words. The imperial decree arrives tomorrow. It is too late to go back on it now. I slumped onto the chair, feeling like the sky had collapsed. I calculated everything, but I didn't account for Xiao Beishuan pulling such a wild move. This sneak. The next day, the imperial decree arrived as expected. I knelt down to receive the decree, face ashen, feeling like a packaged gift about to be delivered to a new owner. I decided I have to go talk to Xiao Beishuan. That night, I changed into night, walking clothes, avoided all the guards, and secretly slipped out of the Prime Minister's residence. Relying on memories from my past life, I infiltrated the Eastern Palace with ease. Yes, the Eastern Palace. Xiao Beishuan had become the crown prince, so naturally he moved into this place that once belonged to his brother. I groped my way to the outside of his sleeping quarters, poked a hole in the window paper, and looked inside. Good Lord, this guy is taking a bath. In the steam-filled bathtub, the lines of his sturdy back flowed smoothly, broad shoulders and a narrow waist, full of a sense of power. Water droplets slid down his black hair, vanishing into the water. I gulped and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. No, that is not what I came to see. I came to negotiate with him. I cleared my throat, and just as I was preparing to make some noise, I heard his cold voice coming from inside. Have you looked enough from the outside? Do you want to come in and wash together? Meme, I've been discovered. I stood awkwardly on the spot, caught in a dilemma. A moment later, the palace door opened with a creak. Xiao Beishuan had already put on a loose, fitting inner robe. His black hair was still dripping water. A large area of skin on his chest was exposed, and the contours of his abdominal muscles were faintly visible. He leaned against the doorframe, looking with amusement at my professional outfit. Eldest Miss Wen, visiting so late at night. Are you plotting something improper against me? Who is plotting something improper against you? I flushed red, stiffening my neck to retort. I came to find you to break off the engagement. Break off the engagement? Xiao Beishuan raised his eyebrows, seemingly having heard some huge joke. The imperial decree has been issued. What do you have to break it off with? I was momentarily speechless. He was right. The emperor does not joke. Xiao Beishuan. What exactly do you want? I decided to throw caution to the wind. You know my identity. What good does marrying me do you? Aren't you afraid of the whole world pointing fingers at your back? The benefit? He walked towards me step by step, the intense pressure making me step back unconsciously. The benefit is, if I marry you, we're in the same boat. You are so smart. I am afraid if I am not careful one day, I'll be sold out by you. He stopped in front of me, looking down at me with an unreadable smile on his lips. I can only be at ease if I keep you by my side and watch you day and night. I laughed out of anger at his bandit logic. So, you are marrying me just to monitor me. You could interpret it that way. He reached out and gently pinched my chin, the thin calluses on his fingertips rubbing against my skin, bringing a tingly shiver. And besides, don't you think we're a good match? A match. How are we a match? You are ruthless, and I am no saint either. You like making money, and I happen to have power. If we join forces, the world is ours for the taking. His voice was filled with temptation. When you Yuechu, follow me. I can give you what you want, even give you more. My heart started pounding uncontrollably. I had to admit, this man really gets me. He knew my ambition, and also saw through my disguise. Why should I trust you? I forced myself to remain calm. Just because. He leaned down, his warm lips grazing the rim of my ear, leaving a searing heat. We are the same kind. That night, I didn't know how I left the Eastern Palace. I only knew that my grand plan to break off the engagement had completely gone down the drain, and my heart was in a mess. My wedding with Xiao Beishuan still took place as scheduled. Putting on the wedding dress for the second time, my feelings were complicated beyond words. This time, there is no white moonlight coming to jump into the lake, nor is there any sudden treason case. Everything went incredibly smoothly. On the wedding night, Xiao Beishuan dismissed everyone. He walked up to me and lifted my veil with his own hands. Our eyes met, and in his pitch, black eyes, the image of me wearing my wedding dress was clearly reflected. When Yuechu, starting today, you are my crown princess. He took my hand, and in his palm, on the spot where that ugly scar from my previous life had been, he gently branded a kiss. Everything in the past is over. From now on, I am here. My heart gave a sudden jolt. This man, he knows everything. He knows my past, knows my hatred, even knows about that non-existent scar on my body. He isn't Rebirth, nor did he bring a system. He was telling me in his own way that he understood everything about me, and accepted everything about me. Xiao Beishuan. My throat tightened. Aren't you afraid? I am a lunatic, afraid? He laughed, pulling me into his arms, his chin resting on the top of my head. I'm only afraid that you aren't crazy enough. You want revenge? I'll hand you the knife. You want to make money? I'll clear the way. You want this world? I'll conquer it for you. I only want you to stay by my side. In that moment, all the hatred and pain of my past life seemed to be melted away by this warm embrace. It turned out there really was someone who would look past the hostility covering me, see my shattered soul, and then, ever so carefully, cradle it in his palms. The days of being partners in crime with Xiao Beishuan went exceptionally smoothly. He managed external affairs, purging dissidents in the court, and consolidating his power. I managed matters from the inside, utilizing my business savvy and foreknowledge of the future to amass a fortune for him that could rival a nation. We played good cop, bad cop, teaming up seamlessly to run circles around all those old foxes in and out of the court. The emperor's health was failing day by day. He leaned increasingly on Xiao Beishuan, practically handing over the entire government to him. Everything was moving in the best possible direction, until an unexpected person appeared again. It was Xiao Chengji. He actually escaped from the imperial prison. Not only that, he also contacted a few old subordinates who were fiercely loyal to him, as well as some imperial clansmen who were dissatisfied with Xiao Beishuan. attempting to launch a palace coup to take back everything he lost. When I received the news, I was playing chess with Xiao Beishuan. He really refuses to give up. I placed a black stone, eating up a large patch of his white stones, my tone as flat as if I were saying the weather was nice today. Xiao Beishuan looked at the chessboard without even furrowing his brow. It is just the struggle of a trapped beast, nothing to fear. Don't be careless, I reminded him. A dog will jump over a wall when desperate, let alone a mad dog like Xiao Chengji. Don't worry. He looked up and smiled at me. I've already set the net, just waiting for him to walk right into it. The palace coup happened on a dark and windy night. Xiao Chengji led his cobbled, together rebel army, hacking and killing their way straight toward the eastern palace. Their goal was clear: kill Crown Prince Xiao Beishuan, control the emperor, and then force an abdication to seize the throne. However, when they charged into the eastern palace, what awaited them was not panic. Stricken palace servants, but the imperial guards waiting in full battle array, and Xiao Beishuan and I, sitting in the courtyard, leisurely drinking tea. Long time no see, big brother. Xiao Beishuan put down his teacup and stood up, the smile on his face polite yet distant. I trust you've been well. Xiao Chengji was dressed in all black, with a hideous scar on his face, glaring at us with bloodshot eyes like a demon crawled out of hell. Xiao Beishuan, Wen Yuechu, you pair of dogs. Today, I am going to make you pay blood for blood, he roared, raising his blade and charging at us. The rebels behind him also swarmed forward. However, what greeted them was a rain of arrows shooting from every direction. Ah! Screams rang out one after another as the rebel soldiers fell. In an instant, over half were dead or wounded. Xiao Chengji's martial arts were not weak. He brandished his long saber, deflecting several arrows, but was still forced to retreat repeatedly. Looking at the bodies littering the ground and the imperial guards surrounding him tight, he finally realized that he had failed once again. Why, he looked at Xiao Beishuan in disbelief. How did you know? Because Xiao Beishuan paced up to him, looking down from above with pity in his eyes. There is one of my people by your side. Xiao Chengji's whole body jolted. He whipped his head around to look at his few remaining confidants. One of them silently put away his weapon and walked over to stand behind Xiao Beishuan. You, Xiao Chengji spat out a mouthful of blood. Betrayal. It was betrayal all over again. His life seemed like nothing but a joke. Xiao Chengji. I stood up and walked over to him. Even now, do you still not understand? You didn't lose to us. You lost to your own stupidity and arrogance. He looked up. In those eyes that I was once obsessed with, now only mad hatred remained. Wen Yuechu, my biggest regret is that I didn't kill you with my own hands back then. Is that so? I smiled. But my biggest regret is that I didn't kill you sooner in my past life. I drew Xiao Beishuan's sword from his waist, and the tip pressed against Xiao Chengji's throat. The cold sensation made Xiao Chengji go stiff all over. What do you want? His voice trembled. Nothing. I looked into his terrified eyes and said, pausing at every word, sending you on your way. Wen Yuechu, you vicious woman. You won't die a good death, he cursed madly. I turned a deaf ear and put force into my wrist. Squelch. The sound of a sharp blade piercing into flesh. Blood dripped from the tip of the sword, drop by drop. Xiao Chengji's eyes stared wide open as his body slowly slumped down. Before dying, he seemed to want to say something, but in the end, only let out a few meaningless sounds. All the hatred from my past and present lives finally came to an end at this moment. I threw aside the sword, turned around, and threw myself into a warm embrace. It is all over. Xiao Beishuan held me tightly and whispered. I buried my face in his chest, my voice muffled. It is over. Xiao Chengji was executed for treason, and the emperor's already frail body completely collapsed. On his deathbed, he summoned my father and several entrusted ministers to his bedside, and announced the passing of the throne to Crown Prince Xiao Beishuan. On the day Xiao Beishuan ascended the throne, auspicious snow fell. I stood below the red steps of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, watching him in his dragon robes, walking step by step up to that supreme position, accepting the homage of the officials. The chants of "Long live" resounded through the skies. At that moment, I suddenly felt that everything in my past life was like a distant nightmare. And now, the dream is over. After becoming empress, I didn't stay obediently in the harem like other women. I used my power and wealth to open schools for girls, fund female doctors, establish orphanages, and take in homeless orphans. I even persuaded Xiao Beishuan to change the laws, allowing women to take the imperial examinations and become officials in the court. These actions seemed shocking at the time, and drew countless criticisms. But Xiao Beishuan always stood behind me, supporting me unconditionally. "My empress, whatever you want to do, just do it." In the royal court, he said to all the opposing ministers, "If the sky falls, I will hold it up for her." With a husband like this, what more could I ask for? Our days were simple and happy. Occasionally, we would also argue over small things. For example, he complained that I reviewed memorials until too late and didn't take care of my health. I complained that he always came running to eavesdrop whenever I was discussing matters with the female officials. "Xiao Beishuan, can't you act a bit like an emperor? Can't you stop sticking to me all the time?" I slammed a memorial in front of him. He leaned close with a cheeky grin, hugging me from behind. "My empire is all yours. Is there a problem with me sticking to my own empire?" Fine, you win." Time flew, and the years passed like a shuttle. In a flash, 10 years passed. Xiao Beishuan and I had a son and a daughter. My son was made crown prince. Despite his young age, he has already got his dad's scheming style, running the whole bunch of grand tutors in circles. My daughter is like me, loving money like her life. At such a young age, she has already opened her own bank, borrowing all the pocket money from everyone in the palace, and even declared that she'll become the #1 richest woman in the world. My dad has already retired and returned to his hometown, tending to flowers and teasing birds every day. So incredibly pleasant. And I, too, finally laid down all my burdens, handing over the matters in my hands to the female officials I had trained. "You Wechu," he suddenly spoke. If there is a next life, would you still be willing to marry me?" I thought for a moment, smiled, and shook my head. I wouldn't. His body stiffened. I turned my head, watching his face instantly tense up, stood on tiptoe, and kissed him on the lips. "In the next life, I'll be the one to marry you."